Hi everyone, our very dear viewers. My name is Yulia Horwat. Sunday, that means the UATV Weekly Digest is on now. We didn't skip any big stories and we added some really good analysis from our experts. So today in the episode. Hungary elections. Does Orban have a chance to win again? And will Russia try to interfere in the voting? Russians scared of Ukrainian missiles. They may cancel the sacred May 9th parade. Easter ceasefire broken. Russian army killed Ukrainian evacuation team after the ceasefire began. We'll get to all of that in a moment. For now, follow us, drop us a like, and get ready for a packed show. Let's begin. The Russians are scared of Ukrainian missiles. Now they're talking about canceling their big sacred event, the Victory Day parade on the May 9th. Russian Telegram channels are spreading the news. They say it's too dangerous to hold big public events because of the missile threat. One of their military bloggers, Ilya Tumanov, is saying the same thing. According to him, they've already canceled the air part of the parade, and they might move the whole event to another date. The Kremlin is really worried about looking weak. They wanted to take Kyiv in 3 days, but 4 years later, they're scared of Ukrainian missiles flying toward Moscow.
The reason for the possible cancellation of the parade in Moscow may be the threat of the use of new missiles that the Ukrainians might have. Roughly speaking, they could strike the participants of the parade. I have received similar information from St. Petersburg as well, where the ground part of the parade has also been postponed, rescheduled, or modified. Can you imagine, right in the middle of the parade, a missile alert is announced? And then what? What happens next? Obviously, the broadcast would be interrupted. But what would be happening on the square and around it? It wouldn't be a great situation, and of course it would be a significant blow in terms of media impact.
On top of that, in March, Ukraine hit more targets with drones than Russia did for the first time in the whole war. ABC News reported it. Last month, the Russians launched about 6,500 drones and missiles at us. At the same time, they claimed they shot down 7,347 Ukrainian drones. And that's only the ones that they say they hit. Many more got through. A lot of them struck their targets. This shows Ukraine's drone capabilities have grown a lot. The Russians still haven't learned from their mistakes. This week, Ukraine attacked the Ust-Luga oil terminal in Russia's Leningrad region again. Ukraine General Staff confirmed it. Meanwhile, the BBC says Ukrainian strikes have badly hurt the work of Russia's most important oil ports, Ust-Luga and Primorsk. According to the Kyiv School of Economics, about half of all Russian oil and oil product exports go through these ports. At the end of March, exports dropped by 53%. This has ruined Putin's plan to save his economy with big profits. Moscow couldn't make the huge money they expected from the rise in world oil prices. Ukrainian drones also struck the Admiral Makarov, its frigate in Novorossiysk, a ship that carries Caliber missiles. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned system forces, Robert Madar Brovdy, reported it. In his post, he said the Russians tried to shoot down the drones right from the ship's deck. But it didn't stop our drones from hitting the vessel. We also struck the Sivas floating drilling platform. So this week gave us some pretty impressive footage. We're not just building good attack drones, we're also making defensive ones. Japan and Ukraine are launching point production of Interceptor drones to stop Shaheds. They will build the Terra A1 drone together. This new Ukrainian drone caught the attention of Japanese business. It can fly up to 190 miles per hour and cover a distance of about 22 miles. The cost of one unit is up to $3,000. The founder and CEO of Terra Drone, Toru Tokushige, said they really like Ukrainian business model and the experience we've gained. Under the agreement, a Japanese defense company will promote the Interceptor drone in foreign markets. They're also bringing investment and manufacturing know-how. The sites aren't saying the exact amount of money, but the Japanese corporation's investment fund is worth $10 million.
Shooting missiles down with missiles might be just fine, but shooting a Shahhed that costs about $30,000 with a missile that costs several $million, that kind of economic irrationality just isn't feasible anymore. And people are starting to realize that. So demand is extremely high.
The head of Ukraine's defense intelligence, Kirill Budanov, said that strikes on Russian oil terminals directly affect the peace talks. He also predicted that because of these attacks, the Russians might even change their position at the negotiating table. According to Budanov, Ukraine must do everything possible to make its position at the talks stronger.
At the next negotiations with them, I think we will hear many new things. In any case, this greatly strengthens our position and does not make it, so to speak, weak. We must do everything so that our winning position becomes stronger, and any means to achieve the goal are justified and right.
Meanwhile, on the front line, the so-called Easter ceasefire might last until the end of the day on the April 12th, but the Russians broke it many times. As early as 7 o'clock on the evening of April the 11th, just a few hours after the ceasefire began, Ukraine's general staff reported more than 400 violations of the ceasefire. According to the Deep State Monitoring Project, the Russians coldly killed Ukrainian evacuation team members with FPV drones just an hour and a half after the ceasefire was announced. At the same time, Vladimir Putin is trying to convince the world that he was the one who called for the so-called Easter ceasefire. But President Zelensky had been calling for an Easter and energy ceasefire all week long. The Russians simply ignored those calls. Ukraine didn't reject Putin's proposal. We want a real and lasting peace, and we keep our word.
Ukraine has repeatedly stated that we are ready for reciprocal steps. We proposed a ceasefire this year during the Easter holidays and will act accordingly. People need an Easter without threats and a real move toward peace, and Russia has a chance not to return to strikes even after Easter.
Right now, peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are on hold. This is mostly because of our mediator, the United States, is currently focused on the conflict in the Middle East. However, President Zelensky says the process will start again soon. Russia still shows no real desire to talk about a fair peace, and Ukraine cannot agree to pull back from Donbass. If we do that, Zelensky explained, the Russian army would simply take the best defensive positions without losing any men. Then nothing would stop them from trying to push forward again. Zelensky expressed concern that the Russians might launch another big attack in a few years. That is why he insists that our partners must give Ukraine strong security guarantees. At the same time, Ukraine's leader once again said he's ready to meet with Putin on neutral ground to discuss the difficult issues face to face. Meanwhile, the head of Ukraine's presidential office, Kirill Budanov, sounded optimistic about peace talks with Russia. He said that Moscow also understands the war must end.
Everyone understands that the war must end. That is why the Russians are holding negotiations. I do not think this will last long. Unlike us, they are spending their own money. These are huge amounts, already measured in trillions.
Ukraine is expecting a visit from an American delegation led by President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. The trip could happen shortly after the Orthodox Easter. Ukraine's foreign ministry said that Ukrainian and American teams are currently working to strengthen the document on security guarantees. The ministry pointed out that new opportunities have opened up recently to make this document stronger, especially because of what is happening in the Middle East and the role Ukraine has played there. At the same time, some experts believe that because Trump's negotiators are very busy with the Middle East situation, their visit to Ukraine might not take place. That is why, according to political scientist Alexander Leonov, Kyiv should go back to Trump's idea from a year ago and push for it.
And from this point of view, because since Donald Trump really needs to achieve some success regarding Ukraine, given the problems in Iran and the upcoming elections in the United States, it's possible to return to Trump's idea from a year ago. First, a complete and unconditional ceasefire, and then all the other negotiations. I think this is the main track that both the Ukrainian side and our European friends, as well as those Americans who support Ukraine and have influence over Trump, should be pushing forward.
Meanwhile, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance criticized the bargaining between Ukraine and Russia over a few square miles of land. He questioned whether it makes sense to argue over it, clearly suggesting that Kyiv should make territorial concessions. The vice president added that it takes two to tango, so the Russians and Ukrainians should work out a deal themselves.
What I would say to both the Russians and the Ukrainians is, we're talking about haggling at this point over a few square kilometers of territory in one direction or another. Is that worth losing hundreds of thousands of additional Russian and Ukrainian young men? Is that worth an additional months or even years of higher energy prices and economic devastation? We think the answer is clearly no.
President Vladimir Zelensky also responded to the U.S. Vice President's comments. He stressed that one of Russia's main goals has always been to occupy Ukrainian territory, and the goal has existed in one form to another for a long time. Zelensky suggested that J.D. Vance may not fully understand the situation because he's not directly involved in the talks. He added that the piece of land the vice president is talking about is sovereign Ukrainian territory, and it cannot simply be handed over to whoever demands it. The Russian army has orders to capture major cities on the Pokrovsk direction by the end of April. But they don't have the strength to do it, President Volodymyr Zelensky said. He pointed out that even though the situation on the Pokrovsk direction is really difficult, the Ukrainian armed forces are still in control. Right now, the Russians are trying to launch a big spring offensive, and the main job for Ukraine's defenders is not hold back the pressure. As Serhiy Brachuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, said, our troops are doing a good job of stopping the Russian advance.
We have some good news from the Kharkiv front, the southern Slobozhansky direction. Our defense forces are conducting counterattacks in the Slovyansk direction. The main goal isn't just to retake some positions, although tactically we understand it's necessary to outplay the enemy here and push them out from the positions they've captured recently. And most importantly, to disrupt the enemy's plans for offensive actions, which they are now actively trying to carry out, starting from the Sumy region all the way to the Kherson direction.
Russian losses in March set a new record. Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Alexander Syrsky revealed that last month's Russian army losses from Ukrainian drone strikes increased by 29%. For 4 months in a row, starting from December 2025, Ukrainian forces have been taking out more enemy soldiers than Russia can recruit. In March alone, they hit 50% more verified targets compared to February. It's over 150,000. Meanwhile, deputy head of the president's office, Pavlo Palisa, said that Ukraine is now using 30% more drones than the enemy. He also noted that for every square mile of Donetsk region the Russians occupy, they are losing twice as many killed and wounded as they did a year ago.
On average, the Russian Federation can put between 25 and 35 to 38,000 troops into service each month, depending on how aggressively they bribe their population to fight against Ukraine. In March, we eliminated 35,000. Verified. What does verified mean? That means every Russian occupier who was on the battlefield, for whom there is video evidence or another reliable source confirming that this occupier has gone straight to hell for good.
Ukrainian soldiers continue to amaze people. A 19-year-old infantryman with a call sign Melee captured 3 Russian soldiers during an assault, even after he was wounded by a drone strike. He explained that he was ordered to enter a bunker that was thought to be empty, but inside he found Russian soldiers hiding in a back room. Melee decided to use psychology on them. The young soldier bluffed, and the Russians believed him and surrendered. However, the Russian side would rather kill their own men than let them be taken prisoner. According to the infantryman, as he and the captured soldiers tried to move away from the position, a Russian drone dropped a large munition right next to them. Despite the shock at his wounds, the 19-year-old hero evacuated together with his prisoners and managed to add new people to the exchange list. Election day has arrived. Hungary held its parliamentary elections. Right now, the vote count is underway, and we are watching it closely. In Budapest, just before the elections, a huge anti-government concert took place. The event lasted almost 7 hours. Thousands of people gathered there who are tied to country's longtime Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Reports say more than 100,000 people attended the rally. Another 100,000 watched the live stream online. The crowd chanted anti-governmental slogans. One of their main chants was "Russians go home." That slogan is well known from the Hungarian Revolution of 1956 and has become popular again because of Hungarian government's close ties with Moscow.
So Ruski Kaza means Russians go home. It's a slogan that I've heard constantly since arriving here in Budapest. And it's in response to the Prime Minister here saying that he is Putin's servant. There's about 100,000 people here in the capital of Hungary, and these protests against corruption, against Orban, have gotten bigger every single day. They're becoming unprecedented.
Our reporter in Budapest asked local people how they feel right before the elections. He spoke especially with those who attended the opposition rally. Many people on the streets admitted they are tired of Orban's unchanging rule. Let's hear what they had to say.
This is the first time I'm voting. I think I'm voting for TISA, probably. TISA part. I don't know what's going to be the specific outcome for both sides, but I really hope there aren't going to be any like riots and, you know, the false flag operations and stuff. I mean, we just want to change the regime and see what happens, because this one is quite shit. This one is bad.
Are you here as supporters of opposition or supporters of music?
Opposition, mostly. I have no idea most of the presenter. In my age, most of these kids were not even alive when I left the country. I just came back from New York City to vote on Sunday.
And what do you expect to see this Sunday? What you
I really hope for my family here and all the young people that the changes is coming. And if I'm not mistaken, you're from Ukraine, right?
Yes.
That's for your country too. I wish the best.
And what do you expect this Sunday?
100% Tisa. Of course, I'm sure. I support them, yes, I'm sure.
Are you sure that...
I want to be sure.
We're
Definitely
ready
want
for change,
yes.
Hungarians are angry about new details of the current government's close connections with Moscow. This week, Bloomberg News Agency released a leaked phone call in which Orban assured Putin of his friendship and offered to help him settle the war in Ukraine. Using a reference to the fable about the mouse and the lion, the Hungarian prime minister said he was ready to become Putin's little mouse. Most of the conversation was spent exchanging compliments with each other and talking about US President Donald Trump. When Orban was asked to comment on the released recording, he said he sees nothing wrong with such communication. Another scandal caused even more noise. The media published new transcripts of conversation between Hungary's foreign minister Peter Szijjártó and Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. The talks covered the period from December 2023 and August 2025. They show that Szijjártó was not just sharing information. He was regularly coordinating Hungary's steps to help the Kremlin. In particular, the Hungarian minister consulted Lavrov on ways to slow down Ukraine's entry into the European Union. Investigators also paid close attention to Szijjártó's phrase to Lavrov, in which he said he was always at his service. Europe is worried that the elections in Hungary could be reached. 5 members of the European Parliament sent a letter to the European Commission and called for concrete measures because of the threat of fair voting. Euronews reported this information. The observers pointed to a possible Russian operation to interfere in Hungary's internal affairs, which, in the opinion of the MEPs, is hidden support for the ruling Fidesz party election campaign.
President Zelensky made it very clear when he spoke about these ties between Hungary and the Kremlin, and the fact that this is basically a Trojan horse within the European Union. This shows just how high the stakes are for the Kremlin itself and its desire to divide the European Union, to drive a wedge, so to speak. And both Hungary and Orban have been very good at this. And without a doubt, this victory for the Magyars undermines the Kremlin's support. That's why I think the Kremlin is also putting a lot of pressure on Orban to do everything possible and impossible to take a page from the Russian Federation, to falsify elections, and so on and so forth.
Even with the war and constant danger, Ukrainians are celebrating Easter. They gathered in churches to bless the food for their Easter meal and to receive God's blessing to eat meat and dairy again after the long Lenten fast. They also blessed their homes and joined in the joy of Christ. President Volodymyr Zelensky noted that Ukraine stands firm, stubborn and steady, knowing who we are fighting for and why. We want the fifth Easter during wartime to be followed by the first peaceful Easter across our land. Even our soldiers on the front lines are celebrating, because even in the darkest bunker or the wettest, coldest trench, there is still room for light and God's warmth.
God is in the midst of the city, and it shall not be shaken. These words are engraved here above our oranta in our great Saint Sophia.
And these words are endowed with extraordinary power, which we have been feeling for more than 1,500 days of the battle for life, in which our Ukraine, our capital, our people, and our faith remain unshaken.
One of the Easter miracles happened just before the holiday. Ukraine brought home 175 soldiers and 7 civilians. The soldiers who returned had defended their country in Mariupol, at the Chernobyl nuclear plant, and in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Sumy, Kyiv, and Kursk directions. Some of them are wounded. Most had been in captivity since 2022. That's all for today. I'm Yulia Horova, and thank you so very much for your time and attention and standing firmly with Ukraine. We'll see you next week. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so to stay tuned to what is happening in the world presented to you by us, UATV in Ukrainian perspective.